a city of this scale, this complexity, will always have a multiple set of visions depending on who's speaking about the city, what their core interests or aspirations from the city are.
Hello, and welcome to the U20 Dialogue series. I'm your host Puneet Gandhi from NIUA, and we are excited to bring to you a series of discussions on various urban development challenges faced by cities across the world and its potential solutions. This month, we will talk to experts working in the urban sector on the theme of reinventing frameworks for urban governance and planning in cities. And today, we have two guests with us. We have with us Kanak Tiwari and Nilesh Rajadhyaksha. They will help us understand the process of developing master plan for Delhi 2041. Welcome to the show, Kanak and Nilesh.
Hi, Puneet.
Hi, Puneet. Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, it's my pleasure to get both of you on board. So let's start our first question with understanding what is master plan and what are we talking about when we are talking about master plan of any city.
I'll begin. So, post-independence, in fact, right from British times, there have been town and country planning acts that have governed planning of rural areas as well as cities in the country. The TCPO, which is the central organization, is like an apex organization, and then there are state level town and country planning units which generally look after planning. So, concurrent with this kind of an institutional structure, you also have under the Act the provision to prepare statutory plans for cities, which in other words are called the master plans. So master plans generally are in effect the only real statutory document that governs planning and development within cities. And so it would typically cover not just the uses of land, which we typically understand as land use, but it will also tend to cover developmental policies in the sense of what kind of development, where can it come, how much commercial can be developed in an area, so on and so forth. So it really is kind of a framework that sets out the rules of the game for development in any given city. In most cases in India, you will find the big cities tend to develop their own plans and have their own planning units, or in some cases, development authorities who take care of planning. But for smaller towns across the country, you generally have the state town planning organization, state town planning departments, which are really looking at developing plans for these cities. Kanak, would you like to add?
Yeah, so Puneet, I'll just tell you that master plan is just one of the terms used by cities across the world. Some cities call it development plan. Other cities call it just the city's name with the word plan after it, like the London plan. And it has evolved since the time of its, inception. This whole concept of master planning has evolved a lot, and I'm sure we'll talk about it later. Just to tell you one thing that these came into being because originally cities were developing organically, and soon when they reached a certain size, it became inefficient to move people and things from one place to the other, and people required, so many people living in one place required facilities to live, work, play. So for all of that, a sort of a plan came into being. So that is a very short history of how planning for cities came to be. We can go on to the next question. If you have anything else you want to ask about this, we can respond to that.
Sure. So, no, I like the thing that you mentioned that the organic growth can somehow be catered up till a point and then it became inefficient. So currently, on those, like, how many cities do in India cater to such kind of planning? Does every city have it, or are a lot of cities trying to develop such kind of plans?
Statutorily speaking, all cities need to have master plans that guide their development. In India, however, you will find that a lot of cities have struggled with the planning as a device. So, whether it is to do with capacity constraints or other issues, sometimes political exigencies have not allowed plans to be cleared very easily. So you'll also find instances where plans have been developed, but they never really came into force because they were not able to go through the entire process of approvals, etc., due to all sorts of political and other reasons. So all things said, not every city in the country has a master plan as we speak right now, but statutorily they're supposed to. Under the Town Planning Act, every city is really supposed to have a plan that guides its development.
Okay. So coming on those lines towards the next thought is, so when we are talking about any master plan, what are the different components or what are the initial thoughts that are supposed to be taken into account when we are developing?
Look, this is a little bit of a difficult question to answer, because what happens is how you approach a plan really varies from cities to city. I'll give you an example. A city that's, say, just under a lakh in population is not has not traditionally looked at very complex issues. It's generally looking at what kind of new land needs to be brought under urbanization, how much agricultural land can we bring under urbanization, for instance, how much housing do we need based on a very broad population calculation, etc. So it's a much kind of smaller domain as an exercise, where you're really looking at land and how to parcel that land out for different uses in the city. Like Kanak said, the city needs places to live, it needs places to play, it needs places to work. And with smaller cities, it's a relatively a simpler conversation around, all right, so that's my population. How many people are going to need new houses? How many old houses need to be re-looked at? Where are my new work centers going to come up? Am I focusing on setting industry up in my city? So on and so forth. So relatively simpler kind of linear conversations that are then put into the plan, largely in terms of what they call it a land use map. This has been the classic process of master planning across the board anyways. What however happens with larger cities is that concerns around regional connectivity, for instance, or around resources that are really coming from outside into the city, both in terms of actual material resources as well as people moving in and out of the city, because large cities often take on large economic functions, whereas not everybody is really staying within the pure jurisdiction of that city. They may be traveling from outside, etc. So the kind of planning questions or the kind of things that the plan then starts looking at as a domain becomes much larger. The envelope expands. So what does one look at when one is beginning the process of master planning would probably be perhaps very diverse in terms of the actual table of contents of what all one needs to do. But surely some basics that every city must undertake is, on the one hand, look at land and land resources. What kind of future directions of growth is the city experiencing, and therefore what new lands may be brought under urbanization? That's definitely one of the key things that most cities look at. The second part that cities would look at is there some fundamental need in for redevelopment, for changing of floor area ratios that govern development on a plot, which is also something most cities would look at. The third is it would start looking at intercity transportation, at least in the smaller cities, whereas it would look at all forms of transportation, both regional as well as intercity in the case of big cities. So transportation becomes a big one. And the fourth major one really pillar would really be around social and physical infrastructure. How much water do we need? New spaces to kind of for water treatment, for sewage treatment, for solid waste management, etc. Making those space provisions in the plan is really what plans would look at typically. So most plans you will see actually go through at least these 4 or 5 big question areas that they would explore as part of the master planning exercise. You would also find that some of the more progressive plans also look at a more robust geospatial analysis. For instance, if land is to be allotted for urbanization, they would also take up a larger analysis of what is understood as land utilization, or whether all lands can be brought under urbanization, or whether some lands are really good for agriculture and therefore need to be retained. That kind of work a lot of cities also do. But like I said, particularly when it comes to metropolitan areas, a lot of the fringe areas have already started moving towards the urban framework, where urban peripheries are really developing. So agriculture has really kind of gone down substantially. So it's really a question of where the city is expanding, what area to bring under urbanization, etc., that most cities grapple with. Really, those are the 4 or 5 big ones that I would say. Kanak, if I've missed out any, and if you would like to plug in.
So in India, because the master plans are generally prepared by either the development authority, which is a state level organization run by the state, and or the TCPO, which is again at state level but also deals with regions, other regions within the state, while the important cities are dealt by the development authorities. So one important thing is that the state level priorities or even national level priorities, for example, this whole agenda of sustainability. So master plans are also those documents, or they are these powerful documents because they are statutory to actually manifest all of these agendas at national level and state level to ground. Like if a city is developing is going to undergo development in the next 10 years, how will that development get shaped by the agendas that are at national and state level that are national and state level priorities? This is very important here, because why is master plan the only instrument to do this is because these priorities need a lot of time, and across the world you'll see that master plans are documents that are made for anywhere between 10 to 30 years. In the case of Delhi, it's 20 years, but 10 to 30 years is that long term period for which a master plan stands, and therefore any kind of priority or any kind of development in a particular direction can therefore be assured by the master plan. So that is how, that is an important thing to think of when a master plan is being prepared for any city at the very beginning.
Yeah, just to come in at this juncture also, Puneet, what Kanak is also pointing out now is something that we've tried to attempt, for example, with some of the new generation master plans, the Bangalore master plan, Bombay master plan, the Delhi master plan now, where the previous master planning, which I was trying to point out to you, it was largely focused on very city level agendas of how much land, where to develop, so on and so forth. Very, very land and development oriented regulation framework was what master plans used to be. But over time, what has been realized is that given that they are the only statutory documents, that embed themselves in the law of the land, that they have the ability and, like Kanak pointed out, the power and the strength really to also drive agendas that are more strategic in nature. And when we say strategic, we are saying sustainability, we are speaking of economic growth, we are speaking of inclusive development, so on and so forth. So the whole strategic point of view, which Kanak was pointing out, is now beginning to be vested with master plans because of the fact that they happen to be statutory and powerful documents. And so if those documents themselves can break out of the mold of being only regulatory and land use planning in nature and become more strategic, that's where maybe the future of master planning really lies. And just wanted to kind of point that out.
No, that sounds extremely interesting, because yes, as you're saying that now you can actually drive the national and state agenda as well over here. That brings me to the next point and next question, also on the line that Delhi being the central capital, I think holds quite an importance in such a big country. So, what was the vision for this city that we are looking at the 20-year horizon, and when we started the development of this master plan, and what kind of agenda were being thought of while you are developing this master plan?
So for the vision, Puneet, we went through a process, and I will first read out the vision to you, which is written in the master plan. The vision for MPD 2041 is to foster a sustainable, livable, and vibrant Delhi by 2041, and this vision has three goals, which are related to sustainability, livability, and a vibrant economy. So, underlying fourth goal of this vision is to become an inclusive city that facilitates access, choice, and opportunity to all. So, this is just reading it out. But to arrive at this, and it seems like when you read it out, it seems like, okay, that applies anywhere to any place. So, which is true. I mean,
Yeah.
every place should have all of these features that we are mentioning in this sentence. But to arrive at this, we went through an extensive process. Number one was baselining the city. So baseline is something where you can understand where the city is right now, and only then would you be able to say where it wants to go and what are the directions that it will take. So we did an extensive baseline exercise in which all of the stakeholder agencies of Delhi were involved. There are many, many agencies, more than 250 agencies were involved in this exercise to arrive at where we are right now, and therefore what will Delhi's priorities be. The second simultaneous exercise was engaging with citizens and other stakeholders like civil society groups, professional bodies, and resident welfare associations, traders and market association, industries, all of these groups, as well as citizens as individuals. Uh, we engaged with them an extensive engagement process despite the COVID-19 pandemic. And, from both of these exercises, the interesting and wonderful thing was that both happening simultaneously arrived at the same thing. One could look at visions that were given by people, that were shared by people. Most of them were talking about a greener city. Most of them were talking about a healthier city. Many of them talked about how can economic opportunities be improved in Delhi. Many of them were talking about how gender inclusive, how the city can be safer for women, how can it be better for children. So all of these, when they came together, we arrived at this vision, which otherwise, if read separately, seems like a very normal sentence which would apply to any place. And this exercise was an eye opener for all of us, that it's not only planners that are thinking of this. Everybody in the city actually wants a city like this. So, Nilesh, you would like to add to this?
Yeah, no, you've pretty much captured it. Just, on the question of vision, Puneet, I think it's important to also let you in on some of our initial discussions around visioning for the city. And we realized that, if you picked up smart city plans or you picked up any of the plans, they have very strongly stated visions. And we were wondering whether, we should have a vision that, for instance, says Delhi will be the knowledge capital of the world in the next 20 years, whether Delhi will be Delhi will be something else. So what we realized through this entire process that Kanak just described is that we realize that the vision for a city cannot be encapsulated in something so pointed. A city of this scale, this complexity, will always have a multiple set of visions depending on who's speaking about the city, what their core interests or aspirations from the city are. And so to encapsulate that, we realize that we would have to come up with a much simpler set of terms which may appear generic. Yes, they are generic, like Kanak said, but the Delhi specific detail will really lie in the nuanced development controls, in the nuanced policy set that backs this vision up. So yes, we would like to go sustainable. We would like to become more livable, and we would like to become a more vibrant kind of economy and a cultural place. Sure, every city would like to do that, but the path to these would be quintessentially specific to Delhi. If you get the gist of what I'm saying. So while the vision appears fairly generic, we realize that a very pointed vision for a complex city like Delhi would not be feasible. So let's have a generic vision, but what really builds up towards the vision, what really makes that vision possible, are very, very customized Delhi-based solutions.
In fact, the baseline, Puneet, the baseline was done for various sectors like environment, economy, housing. Different sectors are covered in the baseline. So the baseline did not only just lead to the vision. We also did a SWOT analysis, which is a strength, weakness, opportunity, threat analysis for every sector. So in fact, the Delhi specific priorities, as Nilesh mentioned, is what makes the vision special later on. For every word mentioned in the vision, what is that special policy? What will be those special strategies and development controls that will now guide the development in the city? Is how we envisage.
No, I think that's absolutely important as well, because those nuances are where and how the growth should also be taken into account. Again, they will hamper and they will make sure that the trajectory of growth is at a better rate. So based on the Delhi specific nuances, what were some of the strategic complexities that you figured out while baselining different agencies as well as engaging with communities on ground?
Fairly long list of things actually, but if one was to really off the cuff speak of a few, for instance, Delhi is a tremendously water scarce city as we at this present moment. So making Delhi water secure, for instance, became an absolutely critical agenda, which has shaped all of the developmental policies of the city. It has shaped the way the norms governing buildings have been structured. It has shaped the way how much FAR are we allowing in certain areas. It has shaped almost everything, every aspect of spatial policy making of this master plan, for instance, has been shaped by this very strong, solid agenda of making Delhi water secure. Just assuming that no further water from external supplies may actually come to Delhi, if that's a scenario one can work with, then what what really would be the development footprint that Delhi can aspire to, and without really losing out on the economic opportunities, without losing out on growth potential, how can Delhi manage that, but continue to be high on its water conservation principles, etc., and really manage water well. So water security became something that was of critical importance. The second thing that we realized is that it's perhaps one of the few cities in the country that has an abundance of both natural as well as cultural heritage. We compared its heritage, for example, to other cities, and we realized that it completely outscores any city in the country in terms of the sheer number of monuments, old areas, heritage precincts, and so on and so forth. Fantastic array of historic elements that the city has, both tangible as well as intangible. And on the other hand, when we speak of natural assets as well, it has a river, it has what used to be traditionally rivulets that fed the river, which are today so-called Ganda Nalas of the city. It has a lot of forest area within the city itself. Not many cities can really boast of this. A large part of the city is actually forest areas. So really leveraging both this available natural and cultural heritage became again something that was very, very specific, and again something that really strongly shaped most of the policies of the city. Third, we realized is that, and this came out of a lot of the citizen engagement, is that the plan was often seen as something that the citizens couldn't engage with very easily, very, very complex, structured document, and not very easy to read. So that became also again one of the agendas for the plan, of somehow structurally as well as in our writing, simplifying it such that there is a clarity of where the plan is moving, and therefore what are the numbers or what are the brass tacks in terms of development controls that back up that movement. So that clarity, we've tried our best. Not sure, the jury is out, of course, on whether we really managed to achieve that. But the attempt has been to try and simplify the plan to the extent possible, where citizens can really constantly engage with it and shape development on the ground. The fourth big thing, I think, was, and this probably is universally true across cities in the world, is that citizens came up with a strong urge to participate constantly, not just in the plan making process, but to be a part of local level planning and so on and so forth. So we've tried to embed that logic of area level planning, of kind of citizens being involved, stakeholders like traders associations, businesses, academia, being involved at the ground level to shape how the policy actually manifests on the ground. So that became something that was again a very strong agenda for Delhi. I'll come up with more. Kanak, any that you can think of that really
Yeah.
shaped the plan?
So a little different from what you said, because when Puneet said complexity, the first thing that came to mind is the governance,
Yeah.
this whole governance structure that our master plan sits amidst. So many listeners would probably be aware that Delhi is not only a city for which a plan is being made, it's also a state with a chief minister. It's also a union territory governed by a lieutenant governor, and it's being the national capital. Large parts of Delhi are also under the direct control of the central government. So this is unlike any other master plan that would be made for any city in India. And it's in this governance, in this complex governance structure, that the master plan was developed. Within this are these agencies that work for these different governments, the central, the state, and then the ULBs. In Delhi, there are a number of ULBs also, urban local bodies. So just to give you an example, sometimes dealing with all of these agencies that are actually undertaking development in Delhi and also maintaining and running Delhi. Just to take an example of transport. In the transport sector, only in the transport sector, there are 21 agencies dealing with transport in Delhi. So to get them all, and this is a conservative number I'm mentioning because I don't remember the exact one. So imagine just getting so many agencies on board to talk about transport in Delhi, and similarly with every sector. So this is one major complexity because each and every agency has its own objectives and visions for the city for every sector, and to bring them all under one umbrella, because this master also understanding that the master plan can actually bring all of them together, converge all of these objectives to a vision for the city, was one thing that was a complex thing to negotiate. The other complexity, which Nilesh has already started talking about, was related to participation. We did try and embed some ideas related to local planning, but this is a thing you probably know that in participation, if you're undertaking participatory planning, sometimes individual issues or individual problems are very big for the individual who's sharing them. But when we zoom out to the master plan level, it is very difficult to take that unless there is a critical mass of people talking about the same problem. So a person saying that mere ghar ke samne ki nali, or the drain in front of my house is blocked, doesn't translate to the master plan level automatically. It has to be taken in that some sort of critical mass, or there has to be extensive survey to see whether a lot of drains in Delhi are facing the same problem. That is how this to just put these two together, to converge these, was also a complexity that we negotiated. And the third one is an age-old complexity of environment development. Nilesh has already spoken about that, but environment versus development is something, or people versus development is something that we have tried to, and I think we have managed to figure out how the master plan can deal with how development can be environment friendly. So this is something we have managed to do, I hope, and of course the jury is still out, as Nilesh said. But these are the complexities that we dealt with while preparing them.
Yeah, and if I guess down the line in this conversation, we will be talking about the implementation framework. I completely agree with Kanak. Is that I think our implementation framework also, to a large extent, really embodies this particular governance complexity of it, where there can probably be no linear way of thinking about how the plan will get implemented, but one would have to create a hyper coordinated network of people and agencies working under some kind of umbrella structures to make really the plan happen. Really, it's going to be a very complex implementation process. We've tried to really give it an enabling structure within which all of this nuanced, planning as well as implementation at various scales, right from your mohalla all the way to city level decisions, special projects, large mega projects, so on and so forth, will really play out, but all under some framework that is linked to the vision of the plan and the objectives of the plan is something that the plans really attend to.
That sounds quite interesting and intriguing as well, because this is what I also actually enjoy about urban development in general, is the amount of complexity that need to be catered to develop anything, and whatever decision is taken at one point will always be somewhere affect the other decision in a positive or a negative manner. So coming, and we will come back to the implementation framework again at a bit later part of our conversation. Before that, what are the major things that came out in the master plan for Delhi? And so, what are the major focus areas that came out as a result of the whole activity that was taken into account?
So let me just take you through the structure of the master plan. So for the first time, what we've done is we've talked about larger policies which stem from the vision. What are those areas that the master plan, any kind of development within the city of Delhi, will focus on? And these are environment, public spaces and heritage and culture, economy, shelter and social infrastructure, physical infrastructure and disaster management, and mobility and transport. So these are the 6 policy areas in which What is Delhi planning to do in the next 20 years? What is the vision? What are the objectives? What do we want to achieve in each of these sectors is covered in volume 1 along with the vision. And in volume 2 is the second volume talks all about how this development will happen on ground. So while some development will happen on the outer fringes of Delhi, now Delhi is completely marked. There's a boundary marked for Delhi. Many cities in India still do not know till what area will they spread, and municipalities keep acquiring land and getting new land under the master plan. But Delhi's final boundary is fixed now as a state. So the outer area of Delhi's are now coming under greenfield development. That is, development will happen for the first time on erstwhile agricultural land. And other areas in Delhi, Delhi, as you know, is a very old city also, and even planned Delhi is now an old city. And a lot of buildings are dilapidated. Many areas are in a bad state, and regeneration is what is required in most of these developed areas. So basically, two kinds of development are proposed in the master plan. One is regeneration of inner city areas and developed city areas, and the other is new development in the vacant land on the periphery of Delhi. So this is how the master plan is structured, and this is how development will take place. Now, for each of these, greenfield development, new development, or regeneration, each of these policies sort of plugs into this, that if you're regenerating an area, what will be the kind of housing that you will give, stems from the policy on shelter. How will you make sure that it's environmentally sensitive, will stem from the policy of environment. So this is how the two volumes have been structured, and this is how development will be guided in Delhi. Nilesh?
Yeah. So just to add a little bit of to what Kanak was saying, and then take off a little bit as well. So if you recall, to begin with, we were trying to point out the difference between earlier master plans, which were largely regulatory and land use based, to moving to a more strategic and a kind of a enabling framework. That's really been the big effort for us as part of this master plan. And if you really see volume 1 of this master plan, it's the strategic element of the plan, which is like Kanak said, in the 6 big areas, from environment all the way to mobility and disaster, etc. What's the strategy really that the city is proposing to work with over the next 20 years is what is laid out in volume 1, whereas volume 2 really is presenting the mechanics of this strategy, in the sense of what are the rules of the game, what are the numbers, how much FAR, what kind of development will go where, so on and so forth, really. So it is really the mechanics that would help these strategies come about or get implemented is what volume 2 represents. So that's really a farak that this master plan brings in, and you will not find many master plans that do this. This master plan is probably unique in that sense in India. It's a first of its kind experiment where there is clearly a strategy piece in the master plan, and then there is the mechanics of that strategy really that's separated out. So that was one, just to add to what Kanak was saying. A few new things that the plan also therefore tried to do as part of this was really dealing. I'm not so sure users are familiar with terms like FAR, etc., floor area ratios. But to simplify it, it's simply a kind of a ratio that determines on a plot of land how much development or built area can I really develop on any given plot of land. This varies, of course, by land use across cities. What we've tried to do in this plan is this starts varying also with what we want to do with particular areas. For example, so Delhi wants to now start moving towards transit-oriented development where people and jobs and play areas and recreation and culture all are kind of beginning to. So the trips that you make, a person tends to make in the city for work or for play or for other things, if one can minimize private vehicular transport, that's really been one of the strong agendas of this plan. And so transit-oriented development policy of really kind of tries to build out this entire intense FAR being allowed in along the mass transit corridors. As against this, you will realize that the fringes of the city, which is the last villages of the city really, there the plan proposes something like called the green development area, where the FAR is much, much lower, and people have to really look at other kinds of uses which can allow them to gain maximum profits out of their land. So land profits are not really linked to how much development you can do on it, but the kind of development that is permitted. So for example, these areas have low FAR but large greens. So they could look at the resorts, they could look at urban farming, they could look at theme farming, they could look at entertainment spaces. So those kind of activities are really being proposed in the peripheral areas of the city. So just to give you a sense that moving from what used to be a very flattened land use based FAR, that residential agar hai, this is how much FAR you'll get. If you're a commercial land use, this is how much FAR you'll get. All of this logic of how much FAR you can get on a site has now been linked really to the kind of area or characteristic that the plan wants that particular area to have. So there is this entire strategy of spatial development that the plan proposes. Number one. Second, what the plan really does is that it starts really saying that let us not have just pan city proposals for development, but have very focused strategic areas that are identified as part of the plan process, which can allow economic hubs to come up, cultural hubs to come up, mixed use areas to really blossom. And again, around transit, a lot of these areas have been identified. So a lot of strategic areas have been identified as part of the plan, which also allow creating priority projects, creating demonstration projects, and so on and so forth. So that's the second thing that the plan does. The third is the big realization that because a large part of Delhi is already developed, we'll have to move from largely a land-based allocation of facilities to a build space-based allocation, where because the areas are already developed but the population is still increasing, pristine new lands cannot be identified where these facilities can be developed. So the plan now starts saying that facilities, commerce can share build space within the same plot and move to a more mixed kind of development as part of this plan. The fourth big thing that the plan also did was become really a facilitating instrument where the role of the state in providing, which we've known is prone to delays and all sorts of problems. So really move from that to a more private driven or a citizen driven development where you move all the way from walkability being planned by citizens at the ground level, all the way to entire sectors in the land pooling policy being designed and planned by through private enterprise and private finance. So that kind of an entire spectrum of private sector development is being encouraged through the plan. And lastly, which again is a big difference you will find between this plan and most other plans across the country, is this whole outcome focus. Is that the idea was to say that can the plan be measured through pure inputs? For example, how many hospitals did we build, or how many sewage treatment plants did we construct during the plan period? Or should we measure it through the outcomes in terms of how much pollution did we really reduce? What is the water quality that's available in the Yamuna today? What's the air quality that we are breathing today? So, really moving it to a KPI based framework is something that the plan does very strongly. So really, there are these 4-5 big ticket changes that the plan brought in addition to the whole structural change that Kanak really focused on, that the plan brings to the table.
So, Puneet, I think if the listeners are like you, not really from the field of planning, architecture, or urban design, if you want, I can illustrate. Like, for example, after the vision, there are these policies that I talked about. And in the first section, which is on environment, there are these, what can you say, objectives. So, for example, in environment, one of the objectives is to increase the net area under natural green-blue assets. Now, for this, one would look at, or for example, another objective is to increase the area under planned green spaces. So this is being done, or this is being delivered through different projects in the city. Now, when you look at the spectrum of projects or a spectrum of development that Nilesh was talking about, whether it is an intense development like a transit-oriented development, where a lot of volume of people and built development will come, or it is the green development area, which is sparse development in terms of construction, but a lot of green areas. Through each of these, through the entire spectrum of development, these two objectives will be delivered. That there'll be more natural greens and blues, and there'll be more planned greens and blues. So that the overall objective of increasing the net area under green in Delhi is achieved through the development. This is how it happens for each of the policies, whether it's related to social infrastructure or it's related to housing, that it was realized in the baseline. So that thread, like of the previous master plan, 2021 master plan, or even before that, a lot of people were critical about the fact that the vision seems as a separate statement and does not flow through the entire process of development. Like, how is that vision manifest in the development was not clear in the previous plan. We have tried to do that. Of course, we also have 20 years to see how this happens. But what we've tried to do is, through these objectives flowing into each of the projects that will now come up in Delhi, this vision can be therefore achieved. Is has been our effort.
This sounds quite exciting and well thought through process as well, on the lines that okay, there are certain strategy of how things need to be taken forward, policies to be developed, as well as how implementation will take place. Now, some of the things that we are also, like someone like me comes from a climate background and energy background. So concentrating on that fact as of now, because that is one of the key areas in, or sustainability in general is one of the key areas that everyone is trying to focus on, either to make sure that the cities can be developed in the most efficient manner and they utilize the least amount of natural resources. So what are, and you have already discussed like how transit oriented development is being thought of, how your urban fringes will have more of green area. So are there any other specific projects that have been thought of specifically on those lines to cover the environment sustainability perspectives?
So so this has been detailed out in the the policy on environment. So in order to increase areas under natural greens, there is a policy of preserving the greens, but also of enhancing them. In Delhi, there is there is a variety of tree called Vilaiti Kikar, and there are other flora and fauna that are not really, what can we say, that are really invasive and are harmful to the indigenous species of Delhi, of this region. So, apart from protecting natural greens and natural water bodies, there is also a policy to enhance them by reintroducing, and replacing these invasive species and reintroducing the indigenous species. In this, another aspect of care is that the master plan also proposes to use trees and plants that use less water, because as we talked about this before, that Delhi is a water scarce city already. So less water, more hardy indigenous species are being promoted. The third policy related to natural greens and blues is to enhance enhance the citizen nature connect. How can citizens interact with nature more without actually harming these pristine green areas in Delhi? In fact, Delhi is one of the few cities in the world that has urban forests within the city limits. So this is one thing. Delhi is a river city. It's a thing to be proud of. A river city where the river has not been channelized. A river city where the natural floodplain is there. So how can the peoples connect with these natural assets be enhanced is also something that the master plan focuses on. So while this deals with the natural assets, there are immense amount of planned assets in the city, like planned greens in the form of parks of all scales, from tot lots to city level parks, huge parks, and also water bodies that have been made by that have been constructed water bodies. So for this, the policies focus on increasing the amount, increasing the volume and the area under such greens. And secondly, again, making them very user friendly so that people can have access to these, and also make them inclusive. That is, parks, just in the name of parks, won't help unless we have parks where children can go and play, where the elderly can move around with safety. The master plan also proposes all abilities parks, because there were a lot of, in our interaction with people, we understood that a lot of children cannot go out and play because of, them having some special needs. So the master plan this time also says that all abilities parks should come about as part of the planned parks in Delhi. So in this, what we are also doing is that sites that are otherwise redundant, that is quarries or landfills that are being reclaimed, or even ash dikes that are, so in Delhi, the thermal power plants have closed down. So the ash dikes and other areas in these thermal power plants are now being reclaimed as green spaces, as designed green spaces. So this will, in future, increase the area under greens, make Delhi greener. One other aspect which I'll also want to mention here is that while Delhi is one of the greenest metropolitan cities in Asia, as has been said by many newspapers and all, it really doesn't have that good a distribution of greens. So parts of East Delhi, in fact, have lowest per capita greens, whereas parts of Central Delhi have highest per capita greens in the world. So, this kind of dichotomy within the city is also something that the master plan proposes to get rid of, that every place should get. So projects in East Delhi should be able to get more greens as public outcomes from more green spaces out of projects in East Delhi are being proposed by the master plan. So these are the various policies by which, green blue infrastructure in the city, as we've named it in the master plan, is going to get enhanced.
So, several small other things that were done, for instance. So one big realization, like Kanak said, is that there's such an abundance of green and blue in the city, natural, as well as man-made. So there's a lot of abundance of that, but it was important to kind of plug gaps, etc. What we also realized is that for biodiversity to really flourish, one would require a green-blue continuum, a network of greens to really happen, and built areas which often become neutralize the entire green blue continuum to some extent. Can they again start participating in the green blue network is something that we also attempted to do. So for example, all buildings, all new projects in the city, whether they are brownfield regeneration projects or they are greenfield projects, will have to meet a certain green blue factor as part of the approval process, where the green blue factor would be measured out of how much plantation are you planning as part of your site? Do you have green roofs? Do you have green walls? Do you plan to have a water body within the site, recharge pits, so on and so forth? So there is an entire green blue factor calculation that is now a mandatory part of all projects. The second thing, for example, is all development that will come along the nalas of the city, the natural drains of the city. You would have to have a buffer as part of a mandatory requirement, because right now Delhi's drains don't have any buffer kept next to them. So a mandatory requirement to have a buffer that's dedicated for the drain. The fact that you can't put your back and just your services to the drain and need to have a active frontage to the drain actually become, make the drain, rather than turning your backside to the drain, really make it a part of the development. That kind of a logic. Third was this whole thing that Kanak was talking about, is the whole inequity of distribution of open spaces. So every regeneration project, every unauthorized colony that will get regenerated as part of the development will necessarily have to give some space back in terms of parks, public areas, and of course meet the green blue factor as part of the approval process. So a lot of the built density can be brought down, and one can have creation of smaller new open spaces that kind of string together to form this green blue network. And lastly, because sustainability again is a much wider spectrum of things, if you just look at the infrastructure story that's being scripted through the master plan, all new developments are going to be will have to have 100% recycling of their green waste within the site itself. They will have to completely recycle their grey water to repurpose it for non-potable purposes. They would have to have a certain amount of energy, solar energy generation on site. Also retain as much flood water within the site as possible, so that that water kind of really percolates into the ground and is not just that it doesn't just flood away. So a lot of so-called infrastructure sustainability has also been packaged as part of the approval process of projects itself. So really, all the way from planning large greens, protecting forests across the city, to really looking at sensitive built environment development is something that the plan does in total to really tackle the whole environment aspect of this project.
In fact, just meet that for the first time, this particular document has a dedicated chapter on pollution also. So, which of course just sort of tightens this, the rules or regulations that already exist in India related to reduction of pollution, and so all of that is just tightened and reinforced by that chapter. And in the context of Delhi, how Delhi is also one of the most polluted cities in the world in terms of air pollution, how can that also be tackled? And water pollution, the Yamuna and the drains, how can that be tackled is also part of the environment section as a separate chapter. Besides this, circular economy as a concept has been promoted by the master plan in a big way in the solid waste management chapter, where for the first time the plan talks about, and these are things that are globally being discussed now. The master plan talks about a repair economy. It talks about a reuse economy. Like how can industries like recycling be encouraged? Any kind of polluting industries in the city have been completely banned by the master plan. They were banned by the previous master plan also, but here also the master plan is focusing more on promoting industries that are cleaner, that are greener. So by cleaner we mean more like IT, cyber, tech, and all of that, and by greener we mean industries related to recycling or industries related to production of stuff within Delhi itself, like using people producing stuff at home, that whole concept of made in India and all. And greener also means food production within Delhi, like urban farming. For the first time, Delhi master plan has brought in agriculture as an activity within city limits. Otherwise, generally it was like development slash development and agriculture. So agricultural land came under development. But this time the master plan does talk about urban agriculture, where food production, food security, all of these are terms that are mentioned. However, some of these are still things that will evolve over time. And the master plan with its, the implementation process also mentions how the master plan can take a U-turn, is a flexible document, take a U-turn, reevaluate, recalibrate, and, go back to the public again, depending on what kind of changes happen in needs of people, aspirations of people, the kind of importance Delhi acquires, regional importance, global importance. That kind of flexibility is there in the master plan to accommodate all of this and rethink or reinforce all of these ideas that have been put in, but are not completely, like, I wouldn't say that they are completely detailed out. How this will happen is not completely detailed out, but these ideas are there now.
Wow, this is quite a lot of good information for sure, because this makes it interesting, because so while we are also developing CSCF, we are also promoting how these things can be picked up by cities, most of the things that you have already mentioned. And something like this, if comes out as a statutory document, I'm sure can help cities in a much better way.
Thank you for listening to part one of this episode. Next week, we'll come up with the part two and continue our conversations. You have been listening to the U20 Dialogue series. To know more, check out our website u20india.org. Do share the dialogues with your friends and colleagues. Don't forget to follow our social media handles for more information. Stay tuned for our next dialogue.